I find your lack of faith disturbing.
This is Tatooine Sons, the only fan podcast to name a canon Star Wars creature and to be endorsed by the writer-director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. Ahsoka's not in The Last Jedi, is she?
Not that we know of.
Is she alive?
Is she in it? No.
Is she alive? Do we know?
No idea. Maybe. No. Wouldn't make sense.
Why not?
We heard her voice in Rise of Skywalker, and all those people were dead. So.
Any chance that you think she's alive at the time we get to the Rise of Skywalker?
I mean, I'm sure Dave could pull something. So.
I mean, Darth Maul has died like 15 times, and
True.
they keep trying to bring him alive. There was a lot of theories that he was marked. What are you guys thinking about Ahsoka? Now, by the time when we're recording this, we're ahead. Let's see, we've seen episode 4. Mm-hmm. Episode 5 comes out tomorrow, but this episode won't come out till the following week. So we're not here to talk about episode 5 or anything like that. But what have you guys thought about the first half of the Ahsoka series? Sam, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's been really, really good so far. It's been encouraging. That last episode was, I mean, everybody's talking. Well, last for us, episode 4 for everyone, was, as everybody was talking, phenomenal. So I'm absolutely loving it so far. I can't wait to see what's in store for the next few episodes.
BB Nate, what do you think?
Yeah, it's been great. Everything I expected and just really well done. Feels like Star Wars. It's a fantastic show.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that. We're not going to talk so much about that episode or those episodes yet. We'll get to them, I'm sure. But this week we're talking about kind of the origin and like her entry into the Star Wars world and her journey through it. We'll do that next after this little blurb from our friends over at the Reverend and the Reprobate. This is Tatooine Sons.
We are the Reverend and the Reprobate, just two best buds interviewing people we have no business talking to. I'm Lucas Pinkard.
I'm Dan Gibson. These aren't tears on my face.
Every Thursday, we interview somebody else from our favorite fandoms and yours. You can check those interviews out on the Christian Nerd HQ Network. You can find us on YouTube at RevRep Podcast at ReverendRep.com. And if you can't remember our name, just go to BaconOffice.com. It's way easier to find new episodes every Thursday. Thank you guys for supporting Christian Nerd HQ, and check out the Reverend and the Reprobate.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody was
making comments about how different Ahsoka is in Mandalorian a little bit, but specifically in the series Ahsoka versus the way she was in the animated shows. Why do you guys think she seems to be a different person, personality-wise and that kind of thing?
We've had... Yeah, I talked about this a little bit ago, but kind of just she's had a lot of time to grow since we've last seen her in Rebels. It's been quite some time, and even then, that was the last time we saw her was a brief flash in episode 6. So it's from the beginning of episode 4 or a little bit before that till like what 10 years after episode 6 is when this timeline takes place. So she's had a lot of time to.
I'm not sure it's quite 10 years. I don't think it's like nearly that far, but still several years.
Isn't there like 20 years between episode 6 and episode 7? I'm trying to remember the timeline.
I think it's more than that. I think it's almost 30 years, but that's not where we're at yet. So we're only like 5 or 6 years, but still it's a long time.
Okay.
So
there was a whole war in between there, so I'm sure that affects things a good bit. We don't know what she was doing during those events, so that probably would have changed her a lot too.
Well, I think being stuck in the world between worlds for a number of years and seeing, the last thing that happened before that was confirming that Anakin had been turned to the dark side and it was Darth Vader. That could do it for you.
Stuck in the world between worlds?
I thought she was.
No,
we'll end up talking about that at some point. in this. But welcome to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. We believe that pop culture is the mythology of this generation, that there is a story, it is written on our souls, and that these myths speak to that story. And that is why we are beginning an 8-episode series looking at Anakin Skywalker's Padawan turned Star Wars rebel. You like how I transitioned that? That worked out well. Ahsoka Tano, obviously. So,
is that who we're talking about?
That is. Yeah. This week's episode is called "The Jedi." Is all about the Jedi. I don't know if that's what it's called, but that's what it's going to be about. The Jedi Padawan's Odyssey. That is what we're going to call it. That works.
Works for me.
Awesome. We're going to dive a little bit into Ahsoka's journey, kind of where she starts as a young Padawan in the Clone Wars movie, to becoming that seasoned warrior by the end of that, and then moving into general and leader, and how she fits into the broader Jedi tradition. So,
yeah. Before we get started, though, I want to take a second to thank everyone who listens to the show. If it weren't for y'all, we wouldn't do this. So we really appreciate you guys tuning in every week and sharing this with your friends and stuff. It really means a lot.
Yeah, and if you're kind of tuning in for the Kingdom Come episode 8 and the final episode of that series on Kingdom Come, you'll have to just wait for that interview with the amazing Mark Wade, which is he's the author of the series, and we're planning on getting that sometime soon whenever we can figure out the scheduling to get that interview done. But as soon as that happens, we'll get that 8th episode out.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have him on, and we'll let you know when that episode is coming so you can be prepared for it. But now it's time to talk about Ahsoka. We've been watching this series for 4 weeks. We're honored to have screeners for the first 2 episodes, so we've seen that like even before. So we've been way ahead. By the time you guys listening to this, then we'll have seen episode 5, and we'll probably have lost our minds. From what I understand, I guess they're releasing that in theaters before,
like a few, like 10 theaters, I think, around the country.
And people, we know people are through the podcast that are going to it. So I wish I was one, but they don't have it anywhere close to us.
No, I don't even know where. I think the closest one is Orlando.
Or Atlanta, something like that, probably. But let's talk a little bit about Ahsoka and kind of her introduction through the Clone Wars movies. It in a lot of ways, it challenged our expectations, but it also set that character on kind of her own trajectory in a really unique way. So when she was first introduced as Anakin's Padawan in the Clone Wars, which is a surprise. He was surprised in the Clone Wars that he had a Padawan. What were fans' initial reactions? How did those? What did they first feel about that? What do you guys think? How they've evolved over time with that.
It was definitely jarring to some fans, just kind of introducing a Padawan that Anakin had. That this was after. Was this after episode 3?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this was after episode 3.
That,
Anakin never had a Padawan mentioned in episode 3, and so it was just really weird to some people to have that kind of introduced and have no kind of recalling of it in the next movie, and you think it'd be a big part of his character. So some people were shocked by it. Some people didn't enjoy that fact as well. So
yeah, I mean, it doesn't help that, to start, she was kind of introduced as like a young, impulsive, kind of arrogant Padawan, not too dissimilar to Anakin in a lot of ways. But
not too dissimilar to Sabine.
Yeah,
that's just true. That's a very good point.
But as the seasons went on and Rebels and things like that, she grew to be a much more nuanced and mature character, kind of mirroring Anakin's own growth, but obviously taking a little bit of a different path there.
Well, at the end of episode 3, Anakin wasn't a Jedi anymore. Ahsoka wasn't a Jedi anymore. So in some ways, it's the same path anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. And then kind of the reception for Ahsoka was negative, to say the least, when she first came onto the scene in the movie. But eventually, the more we saw of her, kind of the more that fans were forced to watch her, they grew to really appreciate her character and how much she meant to the story and to Anakin and Obi-Wan even, and just the Clone Wars and the prequel trilogy in general, and became a fan favorite character and one of the most popular in Star Wars of all time. As you can see, she has her own show now, and so now she's an amazingly well received character, and yeah, most people like her. So
All right, and I mean, considering the vast, the size of the Star Wars universe, how do you guys feel like Ahsoka's introduction provides a fresh perspective, I guess, on the events of the Clone Wars, even though we didn't have, that really focused? It was like the beginning of the Clone Wars and Attack of the Clone Wars, and the very end of the Clone Wars in Attack of the Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones, and then the very end of the Clone Wars at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, until we got into this story. How do you feel like her story and then the Clone Wars as a whole, the TV series and the movie, changed the dynamics of the Jedi Order?
I think it kind of offered a different look into how things were run in the Jedi Order. We had never really gotten a great look inside the inner workings of the temple, and seeing the process that a Padawan goes through, the training and things, is interesting. And it showed how it was even different in the Clone Wars too, because Jedi were needed on the front line, so they kind of had to trial by fire the Padawans, just minimal training, and then throw them out there with their master to get some on the job experience, I guess, on the job training. And so it was interesting to see like how the Order was kind of sacrificing quality training for getting them back out there, getting them out on the front line. So it really showed a glimpse inside of everything.
Yeah, and it more showed Ahsoka herself kind of questioning the Jedi Order and the war and everything, which she had every right to question the Jedi Order, because what they were doing just kind of wasn't the true Jedi way. It was this textbook kind of, this is what we believe the Jedi should be doing kind of way. And eventually, at the end of episode 3, Yoda even agrees that the Jedi Order was handling things wrong. And then we see in episode 8, the old Jedi Order he wants to kind of get rid of it. So Ahsoka was ahead of her time when it comes to kind of going against the Jedi code and Jedi protocol. And so it explored that, and not only that, but with the war and the clones and Ahsoka dealing with Captain Rex and, all of that. And so that was important too for her. And so, yeah, it was big.
Yeah, you mentioned Captain Rex. Another thing that kind of, I think her character shows an interesting look into Star Wars is like the relationships she has with a lot of different characters, like Plo Koon, who found her, and Captain Rex, obviously one of her greatest friends. And then even like Barriss Offee, that was an interesting character. We thought she was a friend, but turns out she had this exact same idea that Ahsoka had. She just went around
about
it,
like the Jedi Order and the corruption within it. And all
just
that.
Went about it the completely wrong way. But all of that kind of helps deepen the Star Wars universe, shows that everything's connected. It fleshes out some of those characters that you only get to see for a couple minutes or not at all in the movies, and gives them a richer backstory to everything.
It does change the way that you view everything in Revenge of the Sith too. The fall of the Jedi Order, the conflict that Anakin has and how he falls, and how Palpatine, Sidious, is able to manipulate Anakin through his distrust of the Jedi Order. None of that. It works just fine in the standalone movie when you just know the movie, but when you have those 7 seasons of the Clone Wars and the story of Ahsoka falling, or removing herself from the Jedi Order, framed and then removing herself later when she's vindicated, it changes everything about that. Let's look at, you guys were talking about the relationships in this. Let's look a little bit more about that, but not just Anakin. Sam, you brought up some relationships with like Rex and Plo Koon and that kind of thing. How do you guys perceive sort of the evolution of these relationships? Maybe let's start with Anakin and Ahsoka's relationship in light of Anakin's eventual fall and transformation into the Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Vader.
Yeah, towards the beginning of Ahsoka meeting Anakin, vice versa, Anakin was pretty hesitant on taking a Padawan on. He didn't feel like that was necessary. He just was a Jedi Knight, and he was with Obi-Wan, kind of fighting in the war and doing what he needed to do, and that a Padawan wasn't necessary. But eventually, he found out a Padawan was necessary, and he kind of grew with her, and Ahsoka teach Anakin some things that he needed to learn and just helped him throughout stuff. And honestly, I think Ahsoka was the reason Anakin stayed in the Jedi Order for as long as he did at that point. Don't know what would happen if she wasn't there. So their bond became really close towards the end of the series, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we mentioned earlier that they tend to be pretty similar in a lot of ways, which is why I think they're such a good dynamic. But they also tend to butt heads a lot. They're both.
Well, it's probably the similarities that actually cause them to butt heads, because you see other people's. You see your own weaknesses in other people, and you react to those because you know they're your own weaknesses.
Yeah.
So
they're both pretty impulsive, and the first idea they have, they kind of take it, and obviously they're both pretty rebellious against the way the Jedi Order handles things throughout the whole thing. The standard protocol doesn't mean anything to them. They just the mission is their mindset. Regardless of kind of what happens, although Anakin tends to take a bit more of a dark side approach to it sometimes, kind of he skates the line a little bit, but they both have that kind of rebelliousness to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they definitely do. And there was moments where Anakin's darker tendencies surface, especially in the Mortis arc and everything that happened with that in that realm. I don't remember what that realm was called.
I don't think we know.
It had a name.
I don't remember that.
I think it did. It was probably weird, whatever it was. But Ahsoka kind of reacted to Anakin's darker tendencies with some caution, but also knew how good Anakin was. So she always kind of looked for that good in him. And that was consistently what happened, leading up to his downfall and eventually Rebels and everything that happened with that kind of caused things to break apart, especially her fight with Vader in the Shadow of the Apprentice.
Twilight of the
Apprentice. I feel like Shadow of the Apprentice is a different story too in Star Wars, but Twilight of the Apprentice, ending of season 2, that fight between Vader and Ahsoka, when Ahsoka finally finds out Anakin is Vader, it's really impactful, and it means a lot to Ahsoka, and that's when she sacrifices herself, basically, because it feels like she doesn't know if she has much to live for even at that point after finding that out. And so it's dark. They had a strong bond for sure.
We have to talk about it. There's no reason for us to hold off, because by the time this episode comes out, everyone's going to have been spoiled on this issue. So
if you weren't spoiled like 2 minutes after the episode dropped, anyways.
So the relationship between Anakin and Ahsoka is renewed at the end of episode 4 of the Ahsoka series when Ahsoka goes. Did she die and go to the world between worlds?
I don't know.
What do you guys think?
I don't even know if that's the world between worlds. I don't know why everybody's so set
looks
on that.
like the world between worlds.
It looks like it, but the Mortis stuff also looks like world between worlds. The star mapped also looked like world between worlds.
But are those is the world between worlds that all of that?
No, I'm wondering if that's just the world between worlds is a part of the Force, because that was easily, we can all agree, the world between worlds is something to do with the Force.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the Purgle,
And
transfers for the Force.
The Force is crazy, and there's so much we don't know about it. Genuinely, if she did die, I don't think she went to the world between worlds. I think she went to the place where the Jedi go after death, where they can
where they become one with the Force.
They become one with the Force. And that's just what the areas of the Force look like, because the Mortis stuff had that similar vibe too, with all the art and everything. So I don't know why everybody's so set on it being the world between worlds. It's either she's not dead and she was somehow pulled into the world between worlds due to the fact that that planet obviously has something to do with Purgles and changing between galaxies, and a bunch of Force stuff happens there. Or she did die and she just got to that place, and I have so many theories of how she can get out of that place, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's where they go with it, but there's just a lot to it. Sam,
I have to know, do you think that Anakin is really Anakin?
I don't know. I think so, and I think the fact that he has Vader's lightsaber.
No, he doesn't have Vader's lightsaber.
All right, never
have
mind.
have you seen the brightened up image of his hilt?
It's like a reverse of his art. Right?
If you brighten that thing like exposure to the max, it's just a really bad, like the lighting makes it look bad, but it's just Anakin's lightsaber.
Oh, really? I mean, I don't know if I agree with that, but okay. So anyway, keep going.
I mean, that kind of ruins my idea, but
I'm sorry. I'm just
he's he's dead, which means she's dead. That's the Force Ghost Anakin that we see at the end of episode 6, and he's talking to Ahsoka there. Where they go from there, I have no clue, but I think that's what's going on there. Is
it possible that... I think that it's connected to the Mortis stuff from Clone Wars. And I think that Anakin he's like directly connected. He's become one with like the Mortis son, and Ahsoka's become one with the Mortis daughter, and they're in the Mortis realm at this point. And that's what keeps Ahsoka alive into the world between worlds. I think that's what's keeping Anakin going here.
I don't know if that's where they're going to go with it, because I have my own theory too. And I think that it would be way more impactful for the series, because I feel like for it to really impact Ahsoka and what they've been setting up in this series so far, it has to be Anakin. Just has to be light side Anakin, either post Return of the Jedi or Clone Wars or something like that. It has to be that version of Anakin. Second, Ahsoka has to be dead for what I'm thinking to actually work.
Okay.
And third, Sabine has to find Ezra. And why all these fit together is Anakin can let Ahsoka learn and teach her, finally again, being the master that he was to Ahsoka, teach her how to handle a stubborn Padawan, exactly like Anakin handled Ahsoka, and exactly like Anakin was, because Sabine is a very stubborn Padawan, exactly like both of them before. So she can learn how to handle that. And then with Ahsoka being dead, she has to be dead so that when Sabine finds Ezra can help her get back to Lothal, to the world between worlds, and then Sabine can be the one to actually save Ahsoka. And all the while, Ezra's teaching Sabine how to handle having a master while being a stubborn Padawan, like Ezra was with Kanan early on in the story.
Bringing this too much time thinking about this.
I ain't got time to think like that.
I figured this all out after episode 4. I've like, if other friends watched it, I texted them that night that theory, because it just brings everything they're setting up in this series full circle and gives us an amazing rest of the arc for Ahsoka to learn her final lesson from Anakin. And imagine the fan service with all of that. Everybody would be freaking out about that final moment that Anakin would have with Ahsoka. A good Anakin, not any mystery, not any intrigue or suspense of it being the Vader Anakin or anything like that. Just good Anakin with Ahsoka and teaching her what it's like to be a true Jedi again, which would work out much better than
and her agreeing to be a Jedi from this point forward,
agreeing to be the master that she was meant to be for Sabine.
This is why he's on the show, guys, because that's like he's the only one that comes up with these kinds of theories.
What's going to happen?
And he's usually right. Now, by the time that you hear this episode, we'll probably know that everything is completely wrong,
or it's on the right
or
track.
We're going to go on record that this was recorded on the September 11th, 2023 at about 6:30 p.m. So, all right, let's talk about some of these other characters and other relationships that she had. Who do you think of all these relationships? Who do you think was the most influential in shaping Ahsoka as a character, and why? I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Well, I don't know if this is the most influential, but one that I think would easily get overlooked is Plo Koon. You know, he found Ahsoka, and he, for lack of a better term, trained her for a while until Anakin took over. And I think that, you know, he was much more of the traditional Jedi, you know, that you would think of Obi-Wan, things like that, right? And I think that's what made the difference for her, is she had like a foundation of what a good Jedi can be, and then also Anakin telling her that you don't have to just be that, but you also don't have to turn to the dark side either. So I think that dichotomy kind of helped shape who she ends up being later on.
Mm-hmm. But I personally believe that Captain Rex, out of like kind of the other relationships she had, you know, not Anakin, if you exclude that, Captain Rex definitely had a big impact on her, and Ahsoka had a big impact on Rex. It was a symbiotic relationship between them, and there was a lot of moments where Rex helped out Ahsoka and vice versa, especially in the final arc of Clone Wars, with Rex helping Ahsoka escape mainly from the ship and kind of fighting all these clones, he was actually fighting his own brothers to help save Ahsoka, because that's how much of an impact she had on him. And Ahsoka would have done the same for Rex if he asked. And we see that Ahsoka was right there for Rex and Rebels as well. So a lot of important moments happen between Rex and Ahsoka for sure.
Yeah. I think, something that really changed the way that she looked at everything is, kind of her relationship with Barra Sophie. That, rocked her world. That whole arc was...
Well, it changed her life.
It was devastating.
It changed everything. Yeah.
She was already starting to kind of question the Jedi Order at this point, but then her own friend framing her and the Jedi Order not believing her all just kind of was like the final nail in the coffin for her. And I think that's why she's so hesitant to call herself a Jedi. She doesn't turn to the dark side because she knows without a doubt that that's wrong, but she isn't convinced that she should call herself a Jedi because she doesn't want to be associated with those characteristics.
Yeah, I think that's a huge turning point in her entire story. Like you said, that trial and her seeing the entire Jedi Order turn its back on her, and even Anakin doubt her. And then her, she's restored, right? It's all revealed that this was a frame job. But she's decided she just can't continue to function within the Jedi Order, and she decides to leave. What do you think that decision meant, not just for her, but kind of with the broader implications for the Star Wars universe? I mean, it was a pivotal moment for her character, obviously, but how do you think it redefined her identity and maybe her perspective on the Force?
Well, the toll that the trial had on her can't be understated. There was a lot to that, and just everything about it being framed, and her knowing that she was innocent, but nobody believing her, not even the Jedi Order, and sometimes not even Anakin or Obi-Wan, like you were saying. And they just were so kind of set in their ways of the Jedi Order that they truly just believed that was right. And even though they knew Ahsoka, even though they practically grew up with Ahsoka, raised her almost to an extent, would rather believe their own order than this person who they can basically know is innocent, but they go through this trial and everything because that's just what's right. That's what has to be right. So,
yeah, and it really showed how everything's not so black and white in Star Wars. The Jedi aren't always right, and then even sometimes, this might be a little heresy, but the Sith aren't entirely wrong.
Oh, I think Count Dooku is 100% one of the most honest characters in all of Star Wars.
Right. So, it really kind of it helped further that mindset that, yes, the light side is good and the dark side is evil, but sometimes how do I put this? Institutions, I guess, that are set up for them aren't always perfect.
And with her leaving the Jedi Order, she was actually able to grow more as a Jedi. I know she doesn't call herself a Jedi and all of that, but she's one of the most true Jedi that we have in Star Wars, because she was able to grow with the Force and not grow as a soldier and not grow as this political tool used by the Senate. She was able to grow as a Jedi and grow in the Force and be able to actually truly know what it means to be a Jedi, to be light side, to be a true user of the Force that can fully dive into that. And she did that through meditation, through isolation, and kind of figuring out who she was in the universe, rather than being told, hey, you got to go on this mission to finish this war and fight this battle and find this bad guy.
Peacekeeping operations over here.
Peacekeeping, loose term, is what it felt like for her. So she was able to actually learn more about herself growing than she was able to ever in the Jedi Order.
Yeah, it's funny. What you were talking about too, Sam, ties a little bit into what Nathan was just saying. But the idea of the dualities of light and dark, and how the Jedi aren't always right and the Sith aren't always wrong. How do you think Ahsoka's departure from the Jedi Order kind of provided a fresh lens for understanding that duality, and what do you think are some of the impacts or implications that it has on the broader Star Wars narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think some people would sometimes apply the label of gray Jedi to Ahsoka, even though it's not a thing, technically.
Right.
But that I can understand where they're coming from. She's not tied down by the Jedi's light side beliefs and everything you should do, but she also clearly resists the pull of the dark side. She does not give in to that mindset. So I think it kind of helps her. It's like the idea of not that she does this, but to defeat one's enemy you have to know one's enemy. She doesn't obviously practice the dark side, but I think since she's not, it's the whole, I forget what it is. It's Dooku, the forbidden knowledge, kind of idea. In Dooku Jedi Lost. Right. Yeah. All he wanted to do was know more about what there is to know of the Force, and the Jedi was stopping him. And that seemed to Ahsoka. It also kind of this idea of mistrust.
Yeah. It also reminds me somewhat of what I think that we're going to learn about Baylan and I cannot ever remember Shin, because I don't see them as being, they're not Sith.
No.
Right. It's why Dave Filoni chose to do a different color in their lightsaber. Right. And it's not gray Jedi, but it's definitely a blend of Jedi and Sith in the way that they function. I think that we're going to see that on there.
Mm-hmm. And kind of when Ahsoka left the Jedi Order, the reason she had, just all of that was exposing the Jedi Order for her. I mean, some people were still blind to it after she left, but she saw the true nature of the Jedi Order and how they weren't peacekeepers. They weren't really an order themselves. They were just a political tool that had their own ways that just, for what they were being taught with the Force, just didn't make sense. And so she was truly exposed to kind of what that had with the Jedi Order. And so it really helped her see that trial, everything that she went through, helped her see what she needed to see to understand more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and it's not, there's a lot of parallels that you can draw to other characters in Star Wars with Ahsoka. You have Luke and even Rey, where they had their training, right? They had their formal training, but when they really came into their own as a Jedi was when they kind of went off script in a way and had to figure things out for themselves. Luke goes to save Han and Leia and confront his father. Rey goes off to save Ben. That's when they really come into their own and fight. They're fighting for what they believe in, not what the Jedi Order says they need to do. It's the whole attachments are forbidden. Well, no, that's what makes a Jedi strongest. Right.
Because Sith don't have attachments. So if you don't have attachments, what's the difference between a Jedi and a Sith at that point?
Right, you just can't use different.
You're good, right?
Force powers, basically. So she has a very similar idea to those characters as well.
Let's talk a little bit about what happens when she does leave the Jedi Order. Kind of from her, she goes into the Coruscant underworld. We see that in season 7 quite a bit.
The Martez sisters.
The Martez sisters, which play a role in Bad Batch later on.
That's true.
With that, and then we move. They're great. And then she reappears after Clone Wars. We see her again in Rebels as kind of the early days of the rebellion. With that.
I mean, we kind of see her in Tales of the Jedi, too. Her 3rd episode in her arc.
That's true. I think I need to watch those again. How do you feel like these experiences in the underworld and everything that she dealt with, especially with after she left the Jedi Order on the run, kind of from that, shape her perspective on the galaxy and sort of that the socio-political landscape and the role of the Jedi within it? What do you guys think about that?
Well, when she left the Jedi Order, when she was in the Jedi Order, she kind of lived at kind of in the best you could of at Coruscant. But when she left the Jedi Order and then went to the underworld and was working with the Martez sisters and all that stuff, she truly saw what life for a civilian was like, and how the Jedi kind of just ignored that. I mean, that was right under their feet, right under their noses. All of that pain and suffering was right under them, and she felt like they really didn't do anything about it. They were just focused on their continuous war, and that's all they cared about, not caring about the people that needed help. So it really opened her eyes to that.
Yeah, and it ties into somewhat we were talking about with Dooku. You know, Dooku has the same experience in Dooku Jedi Lost, where he sees the way that the Order has basically said, well, this planet has no impact on the Republic, so we don't care about it. And then the Republic then the planet suddenly becomes impactful to the Republic, and they want to rescue it again.
Right. Yeah. And it kind of helps show that there's this disconnect between the Jedi Order and everybody else in the galaxy. You know, there are some people who think the Jedi are good, and then some people think that they're just these high and mighty, guys with laser swords who sit in their temple up on the best parts of Coruscant all day and step in only when it's convenient for them, as opposed to, like you said, Nate, there's people living and struggling every day, and they're not doing a thing about it because they weren't told to by the Republic, Yeah.
It almost feels like the art is imitating life. With it.
Yeah, and it really shows more personal growth for her and her character, because when she's figuring out how to live in this underworld, live as a civilian, she's learning how to grow as a person and as just not following orders. She's able to become a true Jedi in the fact that she's continuously wanting to keep the peace and help people and use her powers for good, and kind of just make sure that she's mindful of what she does and her actions and how they affect the little guy more than how they stop a war, because she honestly felt like a weapon more than anything in the Jedi Order. So she was finding how to become a person.
In the novel Ahsoka, which gets a little bit gray when it comes to its continuity and some of that, but it closes with her taking on the code name Fulcrum and working with Bail Organa to sort of recruit people into the rebellion. And then the next time we see her, she's under that name in seasons 1 and 2 of Rebels, and she's revealed to be this Fulcrum character that's working with Hera and the rebellion. How do you think her contributions or leadership style contrast some of the other key figures in the rebellion? We've got Bail, we've got Mon Mothma, we've got Saw Gerrera is a leader in the rebellion as it gets started. What are some of the unique strengths that you feel she brings to the character or to the table with the rebellion?
Yeah, I mean, I think after living amongst the people for so long, she kind of took a grassroots rebellion approach to things. She worked in small cells, and it's the majority of rebels, right? She worked in small cells, focusing on local issues, like you said, Nate. Kind of the little guy, focusing on one planet at a time, not this grand rebellion that the overall Rebel Alliance with Mon Mothma and Bail Organa were trying to put together. She was more focused on solving the little guy's problems there on Lothal and things like that. Yeah,
and her style of, I guess, leadership is very different than the ones we see in any other story. From Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, they're very political in how they handle things and how they lead people, and even from an aspect a war style, and even when it comes to like Hera being a general and all that very different. Her style is this living of the real world, kind of the style of Hera and what she's been through, and then her Jedi side of her, kind of mixing all of that and understanding that those two things can benefit each other if they use it correctly, and how that can help benefit the rebellion.
And another thing is that she, even though she leaves the Jedi Order, still, in our opinion, embodies what it truly means to be a Jedi. She's committed to justice and peace and the protection of everybody, no matter the cost, no matter how small. Throughout the events of Rebels and and even the tail end of the Clone Wars and things like that. She really embodies what it truly means to be a Jedi without the restrictions that are put on them.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me how a character that was so pretty significantly by the fan base. I'm trying to find the right word. Rejected.
That's a good one.
Rejected by the fan base when she was initially introduced in the Clone Wars movie. Which, Nathan, that was your first experience in a movie theater.
It's a good experience.
You wore a Clone Wars costume and took your blaster in with you, and
you don't think you'll be able to do that anymore.
No, it was awesome though. Awesome. But anyway, she went from pretty much disliked to one of the most popular characters, kind of a beacon of hope within this. What elements of her journey do you guys feel resonate the most now that we've kind of experienced that and we've seen the whole story as much as we can up to this point? How do you think her character has sort of gone beyond, the traditional Jedi Sith narratives and the boundaries associated with that?
Well, when you introduce a character and keep a character specifically in TV shows, you can tell a lot more of their story and of their kind of character development, and you get to see them grow. And as a lot of people who watched Clone Wars originally, they were younger, and so they were able to grow with Ahsoka, and then they were able to grow up to see her in Rebels and see how she grew in that, and now see her in Ahsoka and see how she grew up that much in that. So they were able to kind of continue their own personal story with Ahsoka's personal story and able to grow up with her, and in some ways a nostalgic factor to it. A lot of people look back on her and remember her as a character that they loved to watch on a show as when they were younger, and
they grew up with the character,
with that character. So it's important to them, and so they're able to really connect with the character. And it's different than when you have a character introduced in a movie, like in episodes 1, 2, and 3. When you're introduced to Anakin, you can't really grow up with him, since between 1 and 2 he grows up 10 years, and was 2 years in between Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace, 3 years in between those movies, and so people weren't able to really follow that as much as they were able to.
And they didn't even experience it.
Right.
We've experienced very little of the story between Anakin and Phantom Menace and Anakin in Attack of the Clones.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and another thing is that we've mentioned this a lot on this podcast, but I think it's really important. It's that she challenges the normal way you look at things in Star Wars. It's not the Jedi Sith idea. It's this nuanced, there's aspects of the way that the Sith handle certain things. I'm trying to be very, careful with that. That is possibly a better way of handling things than how the Jedi do it. So it's not so black and white. And that's, we think that she found what it truly means to be a Jedi, and that's why we consider her to be one of the greatest of all time.
One of her symbols of her being a true Jedi is her kyber crystals. The journey of her kyber crystals comes from an Inquisitor who killed 2 Jedi, took both of their kyber crystals, made them bleed, turned them into Sith kyber crystals, and then Ahsoka took them back and healed them. And so they were still broken, but they were healed at that point. And that really shows how much of a light she has, since she was able to kind of get into that, and her resilience, and how she was able to kind of break through that mold and be able to break through all of that and show how, even though consistently and like herself, she could be broken like the kyber crystals, she can heal up and become and use the Force to be able to heal through all of that. And it's such an amazing character through everything we've gotten with her, books, TV shows, hopefully movies at some point, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think we'll get it. I think we're going to go down that path towards a movie. I think that's
especially
what Dave Filoni's Filoniverse movie will be. So we're going to continue to move forward. We're going to learn more about this character in the future as we finish up the Ahsoka series and move into like the Filoni movie and some other things. And she's going to be continued to be explored in various things. How do you see or predict maybe her legacy evolving? What impact do you think that Ahsoka might have on the future of Star Wars narratives and their characters?
Yeah, I think one thing that's already been seen by her impact is she influenced the way that female characters were shown in Star Wars. Now, I think they've always kind of been these strong characters with Leia and stuff,
and Padme,
and Padme. But it helped further cement that these female characters can be strong and can take their own path and forge their own
and be a warrior in Ahsoka's case.
And we've seen that with Jin and with Rey, obviously, and I think we'll continue to see that going forward in different mediums.
Yes, and I mean her narrative potential is rich, to say the least. She has so many abilities to be able to tell stories and so many interesting character aspects with her that just continuously give us new things to learn about. And with Filoni, it feels like he keeps introducing things more and more, like World Between Worlds and whatever's going on with her now, and continues to introduce these new things when there's already so much to her already. So there's so much potential for her story to keep going, or for us to see some story in between when we see her in Rebels and the end of Clone Wars and all of that. I mean, I know we got that little short from Tales of the Jedi, but there's so much more available than that.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we'll continue to see going forward in Star Wars is this idea that characters can carve their own path. They're not always forced into this destiny that's assigned to them. You can do what is best in your mind, what you truly believe is the right thing to do. And Ahsoka is the embodiment of that. That's why she left the Order, because she knew that there was a better way to do things.
Yeah, well, I think it's we've covered a lot there, but there's a point that I want to dial in on a little bit more, and we'll use that in the this week's dad moment.
I am your father.
So in the Star Wars galaxy, Ahsoka Tano's journey is, in a lot of ways, it's pretty eye-opening. She starts as Anakin's Padawan, but then her evolution shows us a pretty significant moral lesson. And it's what you were just talking about, Sam. It's discovering who you truly are. And it's a crazy process that we all have to go through. And Ahsoka's Jedi trial that she has in the Clone Wars was kind of a crash course in betrayal, moral gray areas. It was a reflection of the Jedi Order's own problems. And then she ventures into Coruscant's underground with the Martez sisters, like we talked about, learns what the real people in the galaxy were like and what they were experiencing, how they're hurting. And then her role as leader in the rebellion early on was essentially a master class in hope and in resilience, as you guys talked about. So Ahsoka's legacy screams that being true to yourself is the ultimate Jedi move, no matter the rules or the destiny that others try to lay on you. So it's an important lesson that for you guys and for anybody to listen on that. So that's it. I'm excited about that. Any wild predictions? They're already going to be debunked.
Mine.
You got yours? Any wild predictions going into episode 5?
No, I'm just hoping Nathan's pans out, because I like that idea.
Nathan's was awesome. It's a lot better than mine.
I don't have anything.
Such a full circle for everything Filoni's done with these characters.
It is pretty cool. I'm thinking about the only thing that I wanted that I don't necessarily want as much anymore, thanks Nate, was for us to see the Mortis son in live action, and that to be cool. That to be Sam Witwer.
That would be
playing
really
him
I think
out.
Sam Witwer was Merrick.
I don't. No, he wasn't. They credited the stunt actor with his voice. So with that, but anyway, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So as always, we want to hear from you and your ideas and thoughts and everything on the podcast and the show and everything
on Ahsoka specifically,
and her Odyssey and her origin story and all of that stuff. So please share with us on X, or formerly known as Twitter,
or whatever it is, right?
Whatever it is now.
Yeah,
whatever will be next week. Who knows?
Exactly.
It might change, but
yeah. And of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, hopefully, I mean, you made it this far, so Don't forget to follow us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter and I'm gonna just go with Twitter, and Facebook and Instagram and all those places. We're at TatooineSons.com, and be sure to drop a review on your podcast platform. It's super easy on Spotify. I don't know if you can leave a review, but you can leave a rating.
Yeah, rating is super easy.
2 seconds. Yeah. So like if you're on Spotify, just go and do that right now.
And if you're on Apple Podcasts, you can go that extra mile and leave us an actual review.
Yeah, it won't even have to be long. So just quick.
Just as long as it's awesome.
We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then make sure you stay tuned. Next week, we're going to dive into episode 2 of our Ahsoka Tano series. We're going to talk a lot more. I mean, we touched on it in this one. We're going to dive into the relationship between Ahsoka and Anakin. I'm glad that we're going to have seen episode 5.
We got to watch that special look. Did
you know that there's a special look to the relationship?
New episode?
Yeah, it's called The Master and Apprentice.
Well, I'm not watching it. I'm just going to watch the episode.
Oh, no, I want to watch that. Maybe we'll
episode's
watch it
tomorrow. I can wait.
Right, I can't. Right. I'm going to watch the episode. The special look.
It's only 7 minutes.
Yeah, and then remember, and sooner hopefully than later, but we're going to get that interview up with Mark Wade.
Yeah.
So we're excited about that. So, anything else you guys want to say?
May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.
Joy, please.